Go, 7 o'clock. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the regular meeting of the Mahone Bay Town Council. Nice to see so many people in the gallery tonight. Always nice to have company for these sessions, and the press, of course. Evening, sir. We are recording this meeting, so just to be, ready when it's time to do your speech. And we are making them available on the town website?
Yes.
Yes, we are. Good. Okay. So you can go back and see who nods off around 8:15. Okay. You have an agenda that was emailed out to you. Anybody have anything they would like to add to that agenda? I've got one item, but just a request for some information from the library board. So we'll put that down with committee reports, if you don't mind.
Is that set different from the number 7-1?
Oh, is it?
It's there.
Oh, there it is. Here you go. Council feedback. Thank you very much. Saves me writing 8.3 over there.
So, may I?
Joseph,
I'm
did you have something?
No, just
agenda as
just
presented.
You moved?
just seconding.
He seconded, you moved it,
Councilor
all
Bay.
in favor? Motion's carried. Agenda is approved as amended. Let's go to the minutes of the regular meeting of November 12th.
Be approved to circulate it. Second that,
I think it's a couple of comments about the minutes. There seemed to be 2 seconders missing in two different sections of the minutes. One was on page 3 under committee policy, and the other was on page 4 under new business. So the seconders were missing from both those motions, and I believe, in fact, that both those motions were Councillor O'Neill seconded. I believe, but I don't know.
Thank you.
Committee policy, and what was the other one, I'm sorry?
New business, a motion, there was a motion in the new business section.
CAO, you have a comment?
Well, the first motion, the one under committee reports, carried, which means that it is missing a secondary.
Yeah.
Just as counselor, and it doesn't say anyone's name. But
The
the
other one.
one under new business didn't receive a secondary.
That's right.
And I guess we
Oh,
could
is that what it
change
was?
the way it's written.
Oh,
It died on the order paper.
Aha.
Yeah.
Okay.
That first one, I'll volunteer to second it if we can keep things.
What game is
Motion
on
not
tonight?
second. Yeah, lots of.
Okay, let's go to, there's no delegations, correspondence. For action items, we have a letter from Lynn Henniger on behalf of the Mahone Bay Center Society. And they're looking for permission to put a sign, a Mahone Bay Center sign, on town property.
A motion to that effect?
Pardon me?
You want a motion to that effect?
Yeah, we should have a
Okay,
motion.
I'm quite prepared to move that we allow the Mahone Bay Center to put a sign on town property.
Okay, and
Seconded.
we have a seconder. Any comments?
Just in terms of procedure, this is different from if it had been a delegation. Because
Yes.
we didn't
yeah.
need notice of motion
Yeah.
for this.
No, you're always able to do it on a letter.
Thank
It's just where a delegation might put the thing to you in the meeting. You
Right.
don't have your normal 3 days
Advance
notice.
notice, right, thank you.
I'm just glad to see that they are following procedure because they had started putting it up before they
That's right.
asked for permission.
What has the practice been in the town with respect to private sector signs being put on town property?
I thought it had to come to the council.
Well, I mean, so there's 2 ways to answer that. Our land use bylaw has rules concerning off-premises signage for business. So theoretically, you're not to put signage for business on town property under that bylaw. Now, that's got an exception for a business that is adjacent to any property for the property owner of the adjacent property to make some accommodation. It's just not normally the town. In this case, this piece of property is not a roadway or sidewalk or anything. This is just a piece of property the town happens to own, which is also one of the entrances to the Mahone Bay Center. So in that sense, Mr. Mayor, I don't think we have had much in the way of precedent where we are the adjacent landowner and the land that we own is not part of the roadway.
Okay.
Well, your worship, they did come and ask permission, and as long as they conform to the sign, they're saying they're gonna do 4x4, the sign is not up. The 2x4s are
The
there.
2x4s.
They can be gone in a hurry if we vote against
Very
it.
concrete.
It's all right, we can saw right off it. Anyway, we have a motion on the floor.
We do. Any other discussion on the question? All in favor? I'm opposed. Let's go to the next item. Information items. What is the wish of council?
Motion to receive and file, your worship.
Moved and seconded. All in favor? Motion's carried. Staff reports. Let's have some staff reports.
So the first one's the staff report to council, and as usual, we'll take any questions. I don't know that I have the whole doc.
There's only 5
5
pages. I
pages.
thought it
Yeah.
was a bit slim, but
It's absolutely slim.
Yeah.
I can figure out what must have happened.
Yeah, I mean, what we'll have to do is just end it out, because obviously you guys will want us the remaining 15 pages, including the survey results and all that.
it'd be nice. Yeah.
And if you want to comment on it at our next meeting, or send me questions by email, but apologies for that. If anyone has any questions about probably the least updated part, the budget year-to-date updates, there are a few things that are new in there if anyone has any questions.
Could you remind me under number 3, under the first part of the report, what LCC is, the funding?
Low Carbon Communities
Low
program
Carbon
under
Communities,
Department of
thank
Energy.
Thank you.
Anything else? Stuff just goes
Jeez,
by
flying by
enough.
today.
Huh? Either. Oh, never mind. Okay. Next one is the staff report on a housing committee. Whether or not the town, I think, should be considering one.
Yeah, so I can speak to the recommendation here. There is a recommendation. The report recommends against the town establishing a housing committee for the town at this time, essentially because it recommends an alternative course of action where we start with reviewing our strategic plan and action plan in light of some of the recommendations from Canada Mortgage and Housing Corp. And then if any of those recommendations require the establishment of a committee, so if council decides in its action plan that it would like to do something, particularly the projects that center around actual construction with a nonprofit partner, donation of land, that kind of thing, those would usually require the establishment of a project-specific steering committee. So the recommendation is the council schedule a special meeting to discuss amendment of the strategic plan and action plan. And I'll just add that my apologies, this has been a while since the CMHC report, so it may not be top of mind for everybody. But we have talked a lot about housing between then and now.
Yes.
I'm happy to make that motion.
Okay. We have a seconder. Moved, seconded by Councillor Feeney. On the question,
I just, I mean, as a representative to the South Shore Housing Action Coalition, I thought the recommendations and the methods of discussing the issue were varied and broad and offered lots of opportunity to capture the issues and move them forward. So I thought it was happy with the suggested plan.
okay. So the council will have a special meeting to discuss amendments to our strategic plan and which will drive our action plan.
Rough time for it? For that?
Well, we'd have to have it ready for 1 April for the operational plan or the action plan and the budget.
Yeah, I think anywhere between now and then, if council is looking at special meetings in December or January for any other subjects, it could potentially be combined, or if there are no other ones, then maybe you take the opportunity to have this one, because it might not be as time sensitive as some of the others. But definitely, we're actually intending to try to do the strategic plan review in late February, I think, if possible, just to get it lined up for the budget.
Mm-hmm. All in favor? Motion's carried. Let's go to the 2020 proposed meeting schedule.
Well, so this one is just the schedule. Obviously, the recommendation is implicit. It would be to accept the schedule, but Maureen, do you want to speak to it at all, or are there any outstanding questions, or?
Now, the only thing that's different this year is actually, if you could just pause where you are, look at January 23rd. That's the first example. We're still trying to find a way to represent. Police Advisory Board happens just before council on that night. So last year, granted, the coloring didn't work out as well as we'd hoped to show those two, but what we heard as feedback is really looking for that particular day on that calendar. So we've got a few instances through the year where it's split. But other than that, it's pretty much what everyone's used to seeing and pretty much the same colors, except for a few
One thing that
nuances.
makes it easy is it's always the exact same. Oh, well, okay, it's the 22nd one time and the 23rd all the other three
Yeah.
times.
So that's really the only thing that's different.
Councillor Bay?
I have discussed it already with Maureen. The Economic Development Committee is not on there. We have two people that are having problems with the meeting date we had previously. And so I have sent an email out to them requesting them to give us what times would work for them. And then I'll be in discussion with Maureen and try and see to make sure it's gonna fit with everything. So it is underway, but it's conspicuous by its absence.
Mayor, I know we talked about the rationale behind moving the audit committee meeting to twice a year. I'm just wondering if we have a long delay between the meeting on the 30th of January and the next scheduled meeting is deep into the next fiscal year. So it probably would be making sense for the new council to have an opportunity to review those or to wind up the year with another set of financials around the year end. So I don't know if Dylan, it makes sense to have a more denoted meeting to review the Deloitte engagement, which isn't usually until the summer, but this is the first time I've noticed that there is a long time between conversations about the budget. Now that we're only down to two meetings.
Yeah, well, two comments with that. There actually are 3 meetings because the September one is. We didn't talk about there being split ones, right? But there's
Yeah,
a
that's
split
we talked
day
about
where there's
police
audit
advisory.
and what is that?
And then
one?
there's the September one as well.
That's
That's the
the
police
management.
advisory was the.
Okay, it's
Yeah, so
a
there's
split
one
meeting on the
September.
17th. Okay,
Yeah.
fair enough. Okay.
And then the other point would be with respect to there is a big gap between January and July, and in that period we don't have anything new from auditors usually because we'd engage them in July or in January, and then we'd have an opportunity during the audit in July. But the April kind of period, we do a year-to-date update in the budget. And so council in its budget meetings will be doing the other part of what the audit committee would usually do. So
Okay, fair
that's
enough.
the thought, because you
Yeah.
guys will end up with quite a few special meetings for budget, which we didn't include on here, so they'll squeeze in
So the meeting on the 17th is 2 meetings. That's a split meeting.
there.
17th
Asset
of
management
September.
is at a different time of day.
Yeah, so
okay.
asset management's
Two
in
on
the
the same day.
afternoon, audits
Yeah.
in the evening.
Okay. Fair.
Okay.
So a long day for a couple of people.
Anything else? Can you scroll the calendar up, please? The other way. I want to see the bottom. I want to see December. This is the calendar that our citizens are going to get copies of. And I believe to schedule or to mark the 24th, the 29th, the 30th, and the 31st as the same color code as what our statutory holidays for the rest of the year is confusing and it's misleading. I think we need to mark those days as days that it's been determined the office will not open. I know we call yellow office closed, but we're closing it for statutory holiday reasons for all but the December days. So I think a citizen could rightly look at that and say, well, geez, they get 8, whatever it is, 7 or 8 stat holidays in December. I think we need to designate those days as days when the office not going to be open.
I'm
And
sure we can
differentiate.
achieve
Yeah.
color, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure we can.
So that wouldn't be the 24th and the 29th, the 30th, and 31st.
That's right. Because the 24th and 25th and our stat
Well, the
holidays,
25th and
or 25th
28th.
and 26th, and they get the
28th,
28th for the
yeah, right.
26th.
Yeah.
Right? But the other 4 days are days when a decision is taken to close the office.
You could always make another designation and just put a next.
Yeah.
through those
Oh,
color
yeah.
yellow and put a black
Yeah,
X
well,
through it.
That's what it
Some
We'll
way to
find another-
indicate
yeah.
that it's not a
Slash
stat
it,
holiday.
yeah.
Right? Because in 2021, it'll just be all stat holiday. Okay. We have a motion on the floor? No, we don't have a motion yet to accept this.
With those edits?
Yeah.
I'd move that we accept this with the discussed edits as the 2020 meeting schedule for the town of Mahone Bay.
Seconded by, what's your name? Councilor Turner.
Carver.
All in favor? Motion's carried.
That's good, Maureen. I think that's
Yeah.
that's a huge improvement.
Now, we could just translate that to the electronics.
That's right.
No Staff report, update and changes to the draft McLeod Group Health Services, the development agreement.
So this is the longest one in here, it's just loading up. And I'm obviously not gonna go through the whole thing, but I'll just recap that this report is being presented to bring the recommendation of the Planning Advisory Committee with respect to a development agreement forward to council. So we had the minutes of the Planning Advisory Committee's meeting at our last meeting, but we were waiting on the preparation of the development agreement.
Document.
And so it's available here. It's been presented by our planner, Garth, who is not able to be here this evening. And it's presented for council's consideration. I'm just trying to find what an appropriate place to, I think this is the appropriate place in here. Oh no, that's just the summary.
No.
There we go. So it concludes with, okay, so actually the motion would be in the minutes. No, the minutes are not attached. Right? So essentially, the Planning Advisory Committee recommended this development agreement, or recommended the changes be made. Now the changes have been made. This is that agreement. The developer's in support of it. And if council is in support of this development agreement as presented, then the motion would be to schedule a public hearing on the proposed development agreement to be determined. You have to have 2 weeks notice at least.
I'll make that motion.
Okay, moved and seconded. On the motion?
Can I ask a quick question?
Yep.
Just, there's a paragraph, that it's really, kind of dense, it's got a lot of information in it. The one where there's additional, detail and information being provided regarding the 8-meter buffer. Can you, that's on page.
Yeah.
Page is it? Page 2 of the supplement report?
Oh.
Yeah, it's,
Yeah, there were a lot of weird words there, but I
a
didn't
lot of words,
get the
yeah.
Okay.
get the salient point
Yeah.
around the. This is around the turnaround by the river.
Yes.
And they may have to, I think, eliminate the emergency road on, that's a possibility. That
So-
would have to be eliminated.
Yeah, it is. It's the one that begins with the developer has provided additional
Okay.
detail and information. I read it a couple of times and came to two contrasting conclusions. So I just wonder if you could just clarify exactly what that is saying in terms of that, where there may be an impact to the buffer of the brook. What is actually going to happen there?
Where are you in that document, so I can find it on my
Oh,
computer?
it's in page 2. It's just this.
Oh, it's
yes.
here, okay.
Well, so as I understand what's being stated here, is that the developer has indicated that while there has been no change with regards to the encroachment here, in the design phase, they would be able to revisit the plans for the emergency access road around the back of the building, and if it still met all of the requirements without going as far, so without requiring the encroachment, they would be willing to modify that plan. However, council, having approved the DA as it stands, would actually have to approve the amendment of the DA to remove that or pull back that road. That's how I read it.
Okay.
But I think it's imperative, I'm speaking with two Pats here, that they have that emergency access road in behind.
Yeah.
There's an emergency at that facility, you know, you want access in behind that. That's emergency vehicle.
And I think they'd be legally required to do that.
I don't know what the legal requirement
I
is.
don't
but,
either.
I know that
I don't think the building code per se calls for it, but
I know the developer had indicated he would, one of the first steps he would take when they're in the design phase would be to come to the fire department to see whether they would support it. So you speaking in that regard now, likely you'll be saying the same thing at that time if it was to go ahead.
There is a plan to address it, it sounds like, yeah. Okay. Councillor Carver?
I sort of feel I've missed a beat somewhere, and I'm wondering what happened to the concern about the landscape plan.
Well, let me just, so as far as the, what happened at the PAC when Garth presented a concern about the landscape plan, the Planning Advisory Committee's recommendation to council after hearing from the developer in that regard, and this was summarized in the minutes, did not include a requirement for landscaping plan, and that reflected the discussion at the PAC meeting, and there are obviously other people here, I don't know, as a chair, Colleen, do you want to comment on that?
My understanding was that the planner recommended that the landscaping plan was, the requirements associated with the landscaping plan were not conformant to the land use bylaw, and the planning advisory committee opted to there's a verb there, but override that recommendation and substituted a recommendation that addressed some of the main concerns in the room about the landscaping on the site, but didn't address to the planners, and he's not here, so I'll just but to satisfy the full requirement of the land use bylaw. That is not in the current development agreement. That's my understanding.
There was a detailed motion from the PAC,
Yes.
if I recall.
There was?
That included that point.
Yes.
Yeah, so this list responds to the specific
Right.
requests in the PAC.
right.
So the one about added
And the-
language specifying that all plantings and landscaping shall be comprised of species native to Nova Scotia,
Right.
which the developer did agree to, that was in response to
Yes.
that discussion.
Mm.
And I guess I can just add from PAC that the developer did give an explanation as to why they felt that they would be addressing landscaping concerns, but essentially asked the Planning Advisory Committee to trust that that would not be a requirement of the DA.
Just sort of parenthetically, I find it interesting that the committee is asking the council to disregard the advice of the planner on that. But it's
Recommending
recommended, yeah.
it. Yeah.
I just find, given the
Yeah.
recent experience in another situation.
As the chair of that committee, I will say I validate that concern as well.
Why would you be concerned that? Why would you? I am assuming that concern is coming from the broad spectrum of the PAC, which is made up of members of the community
Yep.
and the PAC, that are overriding the recommendation of the planner, which would have, I think, reduced that requirement by the
Yeah,
developer.
It's really just from a policy perspective. So it depends on the how you see the PAC. If the PAC is meant as you described, then that's one thing. If it's meant as a public airing of the development agreement, then that's another. But to your point, I think you made it in a meeting regarding the the designers that came in,
Right.
that you hire professionals to come and present a position and you trust that position to a certain extent. So it applies to some degree here. So you know, there was a really robust conversation regarding the landscaping plan. Most of us were in the room during that, and it seemed that the salient aspects of the landscaping plan are addressed in this motion in terms of what was important to the people representing the town, like in the room. And that is not, I mean, it's just an objective fact that is not the position of the planner.
Fair enough. So, so there's an extraordinary request from the PAC to the developer that the planner didn't feel was necessary, but the PAC felt was necessary. Well,
Can I clarify? It's not quite that. The planner was just simply pointing out that we have, under our land use bylaw and municipal planning strategy, a requirement to consider landscaping and make sure that there is sufficient landscaping to buffer adjacent properties. And the planner is pointing out that there's no plan to address that. And so the planner's recommendation was that there be a plan from the developer to address landscaping. And the PAC said, this is what we would feel would be sufficient to satisfy that requirement. And
No, I take your point, but I think the analogy of using, you know, always taking the counsel of our paid advisors, I think is not quite what happened at the PAC, from what I understand. That it's to augment the planner's view with the view of the community that's represented by the PAC. Not being on the PAC, I take a lot of comfort in the fact that the PAC has a broad breadth of people on the committee that don't just sit on council. Seems like they came to the conclusion. I know I'm not going to lose any sleep over that. I think they probably ended up in a good place.
As I understood what was happening at the PAC is the planner had identified what he interpreted as shortfalls as compared to policy.
Right.
And the PAC then said, but if we do this and this and this and this and this, we feel that we will meet those requirements.
Right.
And I felt there was a commitment from the developer who made it quite clear that in his opinion, it's difficult to have a landscaping plan when the building is not sitting on the site. But that he was committed, and then we get into the discussion about trusting people's word. We got into the discussion that they would have a plan developed for the building in situ by a certified landscape planning specialist. Not me with a rake and a couple of shovels. And I think it was on the strength of that the PAC has recommended. Deputy Mayor?
And the vote on that was unanimous.
Yeah.
Yes,
On the
it was.
PAC.
The PAC.
Yeah.
I think that, so this conversation started because there was it was expressed as concern that the PAC was overriding the guidance of the planner. Like, that's not my sense of what happened there at all. It was, right? So if I was in the gallery, I might be left with the impression that that something that didn't happen happened. I just want to make that point clear.
Just to go back to my original comment, I wasn't expressing a concern. I said I found it interesting.
Okay.
It's quite different.
And just since Garth isn't here, I'll say I think that from the planning perspective, this is how the process is supposed to work. He raised a concern, the committee felt it was appropriately addressed, they made a recommendation. Garth wouldn't have anything to add at this point, so.
Okay.
And Councillor Bain said he'd make that motion, and Councillor Now said
Okay. Would you like to read the motion to us?
that the town of Mahone Bay announce its intention to enter into a development agreement with McLeod Group Health Services to facilitate development and operation of a 96-bed nursing home and 8-bed assisted living facility on Main Street.
Hearing?
Did we want to put that in the same
I think it
motion?
would say and schedule a public hearing for.
Okay.
Schedule a
That requirement is a
Yeah,
policy
yeah.
piece, but yeah,
schedule a public hearing, but we wouldn't put a date yet because we have to check.
we don't
out.
know what the
Yeah.
publication
Advertising,
dates
yeah.
are going to be.
Yeah.
Councillor
Should
Bain?
that be the motion then that I
Yes.
made, And that's the wording of that motion.
Yes.
Okay, I certainly support that.
Okay, and the seconder. On the motion, all in favor? Motion's carried. So would you like to maybe tell the gallery what happens now?
So what we will do now is we will be scheduling a public hearing, at which time we will, council will accept any comments. And those will be comments that have been received at the office, or people do have that opportunity to come to the public hearing and give their comments at that time. Again, as we discussed briefly up here, we have requirements about advertising and when we can actually schedule the hearing. So we will have to check with our deadlines for the local paper and that sort of thing. So it will have to be advertised in the local paper for once a week for 2 weeks. And here we do that in the local progress bulletin. The information will be around town as well when we can expect that hearing to be held. And watch for when that is.
Okay. Thank you. Let's go to the temporary vending bylaw. Maureen,
Do a recommendation.
Yeah.
This is a staff report from Maureen, but usually I do present these and she's available. Any questions? The recommendation is the council directs staff to schedule a public information meeting concerning proposed changes to temporary vending bylaw and policy. And this is because council has previously expressed a desire to get feedback on this bylaw before we proceed to a hearing, at which point there is already a draft bylaw and it's often difficult to incorporate feedback from the public.
I will so move, your worship.
moved, seconded by Councillor O'Neill on the question.
Just, Mayor, I just have a couple questions on this point. So this, what exactly are we proposing are the material changes? We're going to have a differentiated pricing strategy, and we're going to have a requirement that that there's a 7-day cutoff in non-commercial zones. And what about commercial zones?
There wouldn't be an intention to put a limit on the duration of vending in commercial zones, at least not as proposed here.
And
we're welcome to take suggestions.
And what about, and the vending licenses, the duration, does that apply specifically to the hours of operation or the hours that the temporary vendor's facility is parked on the side of the road somewhere?
It would be a single permit issuance for one period that is consecutive. So you would have to have up to 7 consecutive days in which you were allowed to operate your business.
And right, okay. And then
whether
once
you
you
were
hit,
open or not, after that 7 days maximum.
so every Monday at 9 o'clock in the morning, for example, would be a new period.
Yeah, if and you can't have, it would be once a month, one Monday for up to 7 days. That would be all.
And that would also apply to temporary vendors in the commercial zone?
No, the recommendation is no restriction. Because commercial activity is anticipated in a commercial zone, the anticipation would be there that those type of activities.
So if you were in a commercial zone, you could just park indefinitely 365 days a year forever. And never, as long as you keep paying your temporary vendor bylaw, you're never going to leave. You're never going to be required to move your temporary vendor
This is on
facility.
private property? You mean?
Yes.
Yeah, and I mean, unless it's deemed derelict under unsightly premises bylaw, if the vehicle is actually unable to be moved. Because we don't really have any other jurisdiction over the presence of a vehicle on private property.
What about, well, I think that loophole still exists where you have an obstruction of the view plane in the open shores area.
Because that's not a commercial zone. So it would be a maximum of 7 consecutive days once a month.
Could you hang on?
May I ask for a clarification on that point? This 7 days, does that go with the structure or the truck, or does it go with the vendor? So if I'm, in a group of people who are operating a food truck, can I get a license for that, that truck, and then, you know, my friend get one for the
For
next
the
week?
next week?
Yeah, it's traditionally our thought is it's the business that obtains the license.
Yeah, we issue permits for the business.
The business, okay, thank you.
But obviously, I mean, if we're not intending to leave loopholes, if things come up that we can address.
We're talking about temporary vendors. They're good for 7 days in a month.
Yes.
Do they actually have to move their vending facility at the end of the 7 days? Or can they just close it up and come back in 3 more weeks?
It would essentially depend on the requirements of the zone in which they're located. So while they wouldn't be in a commercial zone, there are different zones in town that are non-commercial. So in a residential zone, it's quite possible that you could park a vehicle in such a way that it was a conforming use, whether or not it was rated to be a vehicle that was parked, say, in a laneway, or whether it was a building that was on a trailer that was parked in such a way as to have appropriate setbacks and conform to the residential zone.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be acceptable. We wouldn't have any jurisdiction. Again, as it was referenced in the open shoreline zone, the proposal is that you would not be able to have a building because you're not allowed to. And so we would essentially trigger enforcement under the land use bylaw after a building had remained in the location for long enough to qualify for that enforcement. Yeah, it's a little, enforcement is obviously, in all of these things, the key to an effective bylaw. If it's not effectively enforced, regulations won't be adhered to.
You had mentioned about being on private property. What if it was a mobile truck like type thing? Is there anything restricting them, like parking alongside the street?
On
Any
public
of those?
property?
No,
Well,
not public, on public, like right on
Yeah.
Main Street
Yeah.
or Pleasant Street or
Yeah.
any of those streets.
The current temporary vending bylaw prohibits vending on public property. We're considering the possibility that could be rephrased to restrict vending on roadways, in case the town has other public property that, by approval of council, you would occasionally wish to grant permission to. Say you'd have just a requirement to grant permission only by motion of council for a specific event. But the ban on roadways and sidewalks, our expectation it would be able to continue. We would not change that. And I suppose that may be something that we hear in the public information meeting, or now that this has been raised, members of the public may say that they feel that could be changed. But as traffic authority, I have some serious concerns given the tightness of our streets and sidewalks.
Councillor Carver? You look perplexed.
No, that's my thinking expression.
Okay, Councillor O'Neill?
Can you, assuming that this will, go forward, what would be the next, set of steps? In terms of engaging the public, and how much input, does the public have in terms of what will actually, like, how is it determined what gets into the final version?
Just voted on taking it to a public information meeting.
Yes, but I'm wondering if that means that it's like an up or down vote with respect to the public, or will they actually have input so that it's different after that process than it is right now?
Yeah, this is a bit of a trial having a PIM for a non-planning document, but essentially it would follow the same process. So after the planning advisory, what you normally do when you have the PIM is the planner consolidates what they've heard in that process, in that public information meeting, and then provides council with a recommended draft that reflects what they felt was an appropriate reflection of what had been heard. And they'll note, and so in this case will note, if feedback was incorporated into the draft, or if for some reason staff heard feedback, we'll note it, but we're not recommending it be incorporated into that draft. And then council will have that draft presented, and then you go over it and possibly make requests for staff to come back with additional changes. And then you would still, because it's a bylaw, have to set up a public hearing. And so we'll go to that and receive final comment, but at that time, the public would be commenting on a draft as opposed to just a couple of suggested areas for changes. And we'll turn this into a little handout type of thing.
Anything else? The draft policy mentions yard sales. Do you anticipate a change in the current regulation around 4 yard sales per year? Are we gonna have every street in town proliferated with yard sales every weekend?
The current restriction around 4 yard sales a year, I'm not sure how it's publicized or enforced.
Oh,
But
it
if it's
isn't.
generally adhered to, we could
But if
continue
we're
to
gonna
list
do
it.
this, it should be.
Yeah, I was meaning to exempt them from the requirement for a permit, rather than like whether or when they could take place. So yeah, we'll have to look at where that requirement's currently reflected. If it's currently in the pending bylaw or policy, then maybe we'll wanna bring it forward.
It was for one house owner could have 4 a year.
Oh, okay.
That's what the
That's
intent
supposed
was.
to be
Yeah.
So you wouldn't have a house that would have a yard sale
No.
every
He's
weekend?
only allowed to have 4 a year.
So you wouldn't need to have a permit, but if we are aware that they've had more than 4, Al can go pay a visit.
Yeah.
It was Terry's book.
Good luck with that
Some
one.
places have a lot more than 4.
Okay. So, what,
So we're on the motion.
yeah, we haven't proposed, do we have, yes, we voted, we had a mover and seconder. All in favor? Motion's carried. 2020 volunteer recognition. Okay. Derek's not here, I take it.
Derek is not here.
Well, he's
we can
usually
eventually
handles
get
this.
Loaded up here. Yeah, he did prepare this, right, Brian?
This is what came from the province.
Province, yeah.
Oh, did we already have his report on a prior meeting?
I don't
No,
think
it's just,
so.
it's just opening up now for submission. Okay.
Yeah. This is always an interesting process every year because after a while you run out of people, right?
I can't believe a year has gone by.
We had him as a member of a group and then a member of another group and then as an individual. And I
think
sat
there's
with
still
one
a-
volunteer at the ceremony with the lieutenant governor and she said, I don't even know why I'm here. So,
Since I was
Modest.
thinking of last year, we're only requesting that we publicize this, right? The dates?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, just so the
Submit
council's
names.
aware, it's the process, basically the same process we usually follow.
Every
on
other
Monday.
time.
We have a town template though, don't we? That we take submissions.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We do, and then council,
Mhm.
I think Derek goes through them and council looks at them and
And in my memory of last year is that Derek puts that report in front of council, so I'm sure he will do that again.
yes, yeah.
But I have a question, is this package that we see before us, is that new? I don't recall seeing this package before, I remember.
So,
It came from the province.
yeah.
So Derek would have been receiving that in previous years and giving us our
Notes.
local form.
Yeah.
Okay. It just struck me as really comprehensive.
Mm.
It was impressive and very comprehensive.
And I'll just point out, your worship, that, Derek has a record of it, so there's not repeats and this sort of thing unless it's appropriate. He's done a very good job at administrating
And to that point, it would be nice if we had a, ongoing plaque that, included, or a scroll that included all of the past winners over the last 20 odd years. And some of those winners aren't with us anymore, as you know. Michael Connor passed away this year, former recipient, I think 2 years ago.
That's
So it would be nice to be able to kind of keep track in the town hall somewhere.
Mm.
And just of the representative volunteer of the year, right? The one, yeah, it wouldn't be too hard. 50 years.
Plywood.
So there's no action on us right now?
No,
Nope.
council's
Okay,
aware that's
good.
where we are in the year.
What's our time frame for doing this now?
February 25th, I think.
Yes, February 25th,
Okay, so
middle of page 2.
when's the request gonna go out to the public for nominations?
It'll go in the next newsletter, which will go out next week, and we should have it before council. I don't remember whether we have it end of January or 1st of February, but yeah.
Buy a book and nominate somebody.
There you go.
There you go. Free ballot with every book.
Free ballot with every book sale.
Okay.
Good point.
Okay, next council items. I had a request, or we've had a request for some feedback about the library funding process. And the amount of library funding that's been ascribed to each municipality has increased this year. Do you know the number offhand, Dylan?
No, but it has increased very substantially for us. I mean, it's a small number, but percentage-wise, it has.
It has. And our representative on the library board has asked if we could share, if you knew that the cost of supporting the library activities had gone up, and how you feel about that.
Yeah, we talked about it last February. I think that's when it was.
The
right?
notice,
It was some
Yeah.
time ago.
They
It
gave
was.
us a very short notice to attend the consultation.
Yeah, we almost found out about it almost by happenstance. It just was a weird process. We were all taken by surprise
The
when it
province's
came, yeah.
process.
And it seemed like a huge amount. I can't remember the figures, but it seemed like a huge amount at the time.
On a percentage basis,
Yeah,
it was
yeah.
quite substantial.
Yeah.
I mean, we're still not talking six figures, but
But it was partly the process, which was a really poor process, such short notice, and it, just a decision came out of the
Yeah.
air.
Is
Yeah.
it
No consultation, nothing.
is it a change in the split of the municipal versus provincial funding? Like, are the ratios changing?
their contribution is
It's
changing.
going down.
Yes.
Yeah, well, that's no surprise considering they're closing every library in schools. You know, it doesn't shock me that they're doing that, you know.
This is the. Oh, well, it was. Sorry, 1 second. But it does have ours on page 2.
What department is that that provides the funding?
Okay.
Communities, culture, and heritage.
Library
So-
division.
I thought,
But the
Well, this is just the top level. This is
The
just
whole thing,
described,
right?
yeah, and then I'll go down to the Bay.
but it looks like the overall funding for libraries is going up though.
Yes, that is
So-
definitely the intention.
Okay.
And the municipal share is increasing, but because the provincial share is also overall
Okay.
increasing.
But are the ratios staying constant?
No, so there's the difference. Mahone Bay percentage, and you can see the percentage was, and it's gone up by a little bit. The share of the total that results is even higher, so the change
Just
is
the program
$2,000.
$2,000 higher.
I think we could
Two
swim
thousand
that
on
somehow.
5,700. That's 1/3 increase.
And then it's interesting to look at our share, you know, and we don't have a library in the community, we have the Bookmobile at times, but compared to the other units in the county as well, just
Mm.
everybody's share has gone up, and the change for STEM MODL is $41,000 increase.
But it looks like the province is kicking in an extra $250,000 too though, right? If you go to give them credit. I
Yeah,
mean,
they absolutely
like
are.
they're putting more money in as well.
Old model, new model, so the provincial share under the new model is up 259,000.
I mean,
And it's a 26% increase to everybody, but it does, it lands differently on it.
So this is just information, like this is
Yeah.
what we have to do.
yeah.
Yeah, one
Yeah,
is
that's
big.
good.
Numbers.
Is there any connection between this funding and the library up at Mahone Bay Center that's being developed?
Or the school library now.
Yeah, the Bookmobile is the only library services.
How many people use the library? Table, just out of curiosity.
Bookmobile?
Bookmobile, yeah. one can-
Jason,
I'm gonna
okay.
say, I used it so much early in life, I feel like I
Yes.
still put it in my
Yeah,
hand.
occasionally,
Okay.
yeah, when I have children around.
Yeah, okay.
So, can I ask, or I'd like to ask, what led to this request for feedback? Do you
Don't
the
know.
Context?
I don't know.
And it was from our library representative?
It was. Yep.
I personally think it's good to know because I certainly wasn't aware of it, so.
No.
It's here, and we all know, and
That probably what led to the request, is
You
that
know.
they wanted to know whether we were being informed or not.
I mean, I would think probably maybe one of the councils in the county had this come up, and then somebody said, well, we didn't really get an invite, where did this, you know, which is true, we really didn't have much time to learn about it, but
Mm.
as Councillor Bain says, we have to pay it anyway, and we know it before the bill came, so.
yeah, I
Are-
have another question. Who's our representative? We've always said somebody.
There.
Or something?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Who is it?
Bill Kowalski.
Oh, okay, yeah.
He does offer that in the question in particular, he doesn't really know why the question has arisen, but it has come up around their table.
Mhm. Okay.
Okay, so we'll draft a response to go back to him on our behalf. Deputy Mayor Noss requests to designate Cherry Lane as one-way traffic.
I would so move the council ask the traffic authority to look into designating Cherry Lane to a one-lane roadway.
I'll second that.
Moved and seconded. Is it possible to have a timeline on that? You don't think?
Well, I know how busy our staff is, I think they'll do it in due diligence.
Okay.
It's in the works.
I know that the citizens are concerned that the request is gonna get shifted to a back burner.
Well, I think the CAO made a comment of a proposed date when they made the presentation.
90 days.
Well, in public education, a must was something like that.
Very reasonable considering the request came in cold, as it were, and I think this is pretty timely response. The folks are organized.
Okay.
It was-
Councilor Bean?
That request has been discussed, but it was never brought officially to council
Until,
until this last
the last year. Yeah.
came in. But it had been discussed in the neighborhood when
Yep.
I knew people that lived on the street there.
Mm-hmm.
It was discussed, but they never made a formal request, and I think they obviously did it. And I think a pretty convincing job with that.
Okay,
So
so we have a motion on the floor. All in favor? Another motion carried. Did we get 3 for the price of one? Okay, Heritage Advisory Committee, draft minutes.
We had another full house for the Heritage Advisory Committee here lately, so very popular committee. So there's a lot of progress being made, specifically around the revitalization of our heritage designation. As you know, we had a successful one last month, and we have another one upcoming. But what we really wanted to do is we wanted to ensure that the heritage property bylaw is updated, as well as the information around applications, the correspondence, the templates are updated. So that's work that's in progress, and as well we have another opportunity for another house that's well deserving to receive municipal heritage designation. So I'd like to make a motion to recommend that the town council give first reading to the new heritage property bylaw as amended.
Second that.
If
Okay.
anyone wants me to, I can bring it up here, just let me know.
Significant improvement.
It's so nice to see it laid out, tidily. in
What's
the-
different
The,
about the bylaw?
you want, I mean, I can speak to this one. The main thing is that we took out all of the restatement of parts of the act and just replaced it with reference. I can bring it up here if, but it's basically, it's made it very short and focused on the necessary procedure. We took out references to the committee because those are all now established under the town's committee's policy. So rather than having to establish the committee and its terms of reference within the bylaw, it just simply references that committee has been established under the appropriate policy of the town. So it shortens it down to just simply stating the requirement to have the advisory committee to adhere to that committee's assigned role under the act, which is also referenced under our committee's policy, and then essentially the registry process.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it.
And where does that registration process originate?
Registration process originate?
Yeah.
Pretty
Oh,
much
okay.
with the Heritage Property
I'm
Act.
only
Yeah.
asking because when I was reading through this document,
Mhm.
I had the distinct feeling that the committee could send me a note saying, we're going to designate your property as a heritage property.
In theory, I believe that's possible, but I think most committees or most communities hesitate to do that.
Does this policy empower our committee to do that the way it's worded?
So the committee itself would never be empowered to do that, but what the committee would be empowered to do is they would be empowered to hold a hearing in which you as the person would have an opportunity to speak, and then on the basis of that to make a recommendation to council whether that property should be listed, which council would then, if the property owner had raised an objection at the hearing or otherwise, council would be able to consider that at that time. So the committee is an advisory role, but it would make the recommendation to council.
So arguably, whether or not, given this policy, whether or not my house is designated as a historic property can be unilaterally achieved and against
by the council.
my desire. Okay,
Yeah, theoretically.
all right, as long as,
Unlikely, but possible. I mean, it's happened in some communities, and it's not nice when it happens.
the only other point I would make is that when we're preparing for these meetings or we're preparing bylaw changes, it would be really useful to have the old bylaw marked up. You know, whatever's being deleted, mark it out. Whatever's being added, add it in red. So I don't have to sit there, or we won't have to sit there with the old bylaw and the new bylaw and try to sort through them.
So we could do strike through.
Yeah,
The
strike
big
throughs,
challenge
that's
is, in this case is that would have actually been done with a ruler. It's not to say we can't, but the old bylaw was typewritten.
Oh, yeah, I know, yeah.
That's
Yeah.
what previously used to happen.
Yeah.
When we did our reviews.
Yeah.
You know,
Jeez.
there was a line drawn through it and something else.
But you can draw a line through it and scan it and it can make it
Yeah.
available
The big issue-
electronically and the new ones.
Yeah, the issue with this particular bylaw is it relied so heavily on the provincial act and just made denoted and linked to the provincial act, in copious forms. That's why you had a huge bylaw. So I think this staff has done a really nice job of cleaning it up and pointing to the act where required,
Mm-hmm.
and but really keeping the the salient points crisp and for us. So I think it's a big improvement.
Okay, thank you. Well done to your committee.
Well, staff mainly
Yes.
for that.
Yeah,
part,
look.
yeah. The next
It's
part is the
editable
committee
now,
work.
so if the committee does want to recommend
Yes,
any
edit
other
away.
plans,
The next part's the
Okay,
committee
so-
work.
We had the motion on the table. All in favor? Motion's carried.
The second item from the HAC is after many years, 53 Edgewater Street, which is the which is the church manse on the corner, have and their stewards have agreed to proceed with recognition under the program, and Penny, I think you've been around the table a long time, long enough to know that's always been a real big objective from earlier incarnations of the HAC. So it's a building of significant heritage value to the community, and so this is nice. This is finally getting done after probably 20 years trying to make this happen. So the honor's yours.
I would thank you, Councillor Feeney. So I would like to make the motion that council register the property located at 53 Edgewater Street as a municipal heritage property.
I'd be happy to second that.
Okay.
And speaking to Councillor Feeney's earlier comments, it has been around for a very long time. I think from the iteration of the committee in the 1980s, in fact, their ambition was to register all the properties along Edgewater. And now if this passes tonight, that means that all those properties along Edgewater will be registered heritage properties, which is quite impressive, I think, for this town.
The Morse house is registered and the Fisherman's Inn. Good.
The statement of significance is included, and it was a real team effort. Some of our Greg Mateer did a wonderful job getting kick-started, and the committee benefits quite a bit from having Bill, and obviously still having Penny, and still having Deborah at the table. So there's a lot of acumen there now. So you can see this statement of significance, I think,
Great
I think
document.
it's the best one we've seen. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, really well done.
and the Kelly managed to get the photographs of the little hand-drawn
Yeah.
sketches in there.
Yeah, from the book.
From the
Yeah.
original book.
Yeah,
Yeah.
from the Harris book. Yeah.
So that was a great team effort, that whole process. And it's nice to have those photos in there because some of our original registrations, because they were live on provincial and federal sites, they had all the documentation and all the photographs, but the ones that we've registered since then didn't have those live links or images. So it's nice to have the images embedded in this one.
Okay. So, moved and seconded. All in favor? Motion carried. Well done. That's like two in
Yeah.
what, a month?
Yeah.
2 in a month, 2 in 5 years, and 2 in 10 years. So
Good. Okay.
we're on a roll.
Yes, Joint Services Board minutes from June. I'm not sure who dug those up, but anybody have any questions?
They only come to us after they've been approved at the next
Yeah.
MJ's committee.
They don't get put on the website very frequently, so we just have to keep them in the back and see when
Keep
something's
watching
turned
for
up.
them.
They don't put them up in draft form, right?
Yeah.
So that's why it takes this long. Hey, yeah, Kevin was still there. Like it was a long time ago.
Okay, hearing none, let's go to, we did the library board, MJSB. New business. Okay, we are going to have an in-camera session. Okay, and entertain a motion to adjourn. And at that time, we would invite anyone from the gallery who may wish to offer a comment on something that was discussed tonight. We would typically have a 10-minute chance to do that, and then we'll come back to our in-camera.
So I move for adjournment?
Motion to adjourn, a seconder? Done. So we'll take 10, and we'll turn the
Yep.
record.